Hello and welcome to Rad Dad Show, a podcast about parenting where we talk to dads about their experience raising their children and hopefully learn a thing or two. Today we're joined by my friend Matt Shobe, who is currently a father of three and the chief product officer and co-founder of a software company called Mty.AI, where they do artificial intelligence for self-driving cars. Matt is an entrepreneur who successfully co-founded and sold a number of companies, and throughout all of that time, he was a dad. So he's quite used to working in stressful environments while still raising kids and spending a lot of time with them. And today he's going to share some of that experience with us and tell us how it is possible to be a great dad and at the same time focus on your work and get things done. Without further ado, Matt, welcome to the show. Matt, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do for a living, who you are, and tell us about your kids?
Yeah, I'm a father of three, and they are 18, 15, and 11, all boys, each different. And it's just been sort of parenting and startupping have always been happening at more or less the same time with some breaks. There was time spent with Google and some other companies, but yeah, I don't know. Some folks I've heard talk about, well, I don't know how you could ever raise kids while doing a startup, and it's definitely difficult. I think it's difficult to raise kids, period. It's just what else is going on in your life adds various degrees of difficulty. And I don't know. It's like as far as how, I don't know if this is going in a direction you're looking for, but it's hard to say that I know anything special or if I have any secret formulas or anything like that. I feel sort of fortunate that a lot of what's gone along with being in a startup has involved, at least for me, not a ton of travel. And so that's allowed me to be, at home, seeing the day-to-day turn into the week-to-week and month-to-month with the kids and not feel like I really ever missed out on any major strings or series of moments or any particularly big events. I know I miss stuff here from time to time. In fact, with Google, I traveled a ton. I was gone at least once a month, every month I worked there for almost 4 years for various and sundry things. And but somehow in, building small companies, it allowed for a lot of sort of local routine, which it was pretty compatible with being a parent and being present. The really helpful thing there is that my wife has been truly the commander in chief of the house, and she decided to pursue being a parent full time instead of trying to do the dual career thing. And I know it's a really difficult decision for a lot of working moms to make, and whether to commit full time or try to balance career and parenting. And she made her choice, and it's definitely made it easier for me to not feel like, okay, you go pursue your career or whatever it is that you're doing full on and balance parenting as you see fit, without worrying about, am I striking the balance right? Am I giving her enough of my time? Are we doing a 50-50 deal here? So it's funny, that sort of ability to specialize and know that I'm going to be the main outside income earner and she's going to be the main inside the house manager and, family product manager or program manager, I don't know how else to put it, right, has been a really good split for us.
Would you say you're a full-time or a part-time dad?
I think you have to. I'm working, 8 to 6 every day and have been since forever. So I can't say I'm a full-time dad. I'm just not. But I'm as involved as I can be, certainly on the weekends and helping with homework, at night, and trying to just keep up with what's going on. And yeah, I don't know. We're full time in the things that we're interested in, and it's just how you spend that time kind of has to be balanced between work and family. And I think, I don't know, one of the things that I've figured out is that the whole work-life balance thing, you really just need to set your own barriers or guidelines and say, these are the hours that I'm going to be on for work, and I'm going to be 100% available for work. And then these are the hours that I'm pretty much drawing a line. And unless it's an emergency or unless it's something really critical, I'm going to I'm going to be fully focused on family or outside interests as much as I can. That doesn't mean I'm always if it's important and urgent, I'm on the case. But in general, it's felt like it's taken me almost as many years as the kids have been around to finally figure out that you really have to draw that hard line in order to be the best and most present parent that you can be, but also be the most clearly accountable and responsible coworker that you can be. And they're kind of two sides of the same coin, because if you're distracted or you're half in one world and half in the other, neither one's getting the best of you. And I think people that really try to juggle multiple things at a time, the whole, I think we put this value on multitasking that isn't really there. That to be able to, I a lot of podcasts out there, and I can't remember which one it was that I was listening to talking about deep work, or the concept of being really deeply involved and single track and single focused on doing something exceptionally well by being really deeply involved in it. I don't know how I could do that without that split that my wife enabled for us, where she would handle all the day-to-day minutia of getting kids to school, helping with things that are going on just in the logistics of moving 3 boys around our community, first in Illinois and now here in Seattle. And just having permission to be like, okay, I can be all in on whatever's going on at work. If there's an emergency on either side, I'll flip to that as necessary. But in general, I can go deep on one and then the other, and not both at the same time, or worrying about being split. It's a huge burden off my mind.
Interesting. Actually, I heard this from another friend of mine who's going through a divorce right now, and now he gets to see his kids less. But he said he's actually getting much better quality time with them, because when he's with them, he's 100% present. He puts away the device, and he's with them actively engaging, doing something together. So I think that's right on there. But let's pause for a second and think of the time when your first kid was born. Do you remember what that was like?
Oh yeah, very clearly. I mean, the day your first child is born, you really remember details about it, like it was a scheduled C-section, or actually it wasn't a scheduled C-section. That didn't happen until the second and third one, but eventually went from natural labor to a C-section in the middle of the night. So it was one of those classic bleary-eyed, groggy, in the ER type of situations, but everything went well, thankfully. And but it was a muggy June night, 1999 in Chicago, or morning, I guess it would have been. And, we were in the middle of, on the startup side, we were in the middle of, I'm trying to remember where exactly we were, getting this service called Spy on It going. And it was basically one of the first alerts platforms. Tell me when something I care about changes on the internet in real life, was the idea there. And so that was going on, and my co-founders and I were all roughly the same age. Dick, Eric, and Steve, and Dick was a few years older, but had his first daughter just a year earlier. And Eric and Steve, they were starting down the same path too. We all had our first children within, let's say, 2 to 3 years of each other, more or less. So we all had similar mindsets. And I think that definitely was helpful, because you have the empathy of knowing what the other person is going through, and it's not like there's this generation gap or even just sort of experiential gap between, you can be in the same generation, some have kids, some don't, and it's like people with kids have no idea how much physical and emotional exhaustion it can cause. And when Austin, my first, was born, thankfully he was perfectly healthy. There were no extended issues. I think we went home, it's a C-section, so it takes a little longer for my wife to recover, but I forget, we went home 3 or 4 days later, whatever the normal amount of time was for that. And when got back to drove home in our Passat, I think it was.
Fancy.
Fancy car, yeah, fancy silver Passat. with the kid in the rear-facing back, child seat, doing exactly what you're supposed to do. He's always been a very calm kid. He was the least.
Being a child.
What's that?
Being a child sleeping.
Yeah, well, he was 3 days old, right? And you're like, have no idea what's going to happen. And driving him home, perfectly quiet, no howling, no screaming, just sitting in the back sleeping or just watching the buildings pass by. We get to our place. We unpack the child carrier from from the car, come up from the basement to our third floor condo, put the kid down on the kitchen counter, look at each other and like, well, they didn't give us an instruction manual. I have no idea what we're supposed to do next. I hope we don't break this somehow. And literally, you don't know what you're going to do next. You're like, I'm going to feed this kid. I'm going to change him. I'm going to pay attention to him. But I don't know. Am I doing all this in the right order? Is there something I'm missing? I must be doing something wrong. I'm screwing him up for life, and I don't even know it. And we just look at each other just kind of like, I don't know. And, 18 years of I don't know later, he's applying to college. He's been a state championship swimmer, and he's a genuinely good dude. So somehow we did it right, but I have no friggin' idea exactly how we did it. And obviously the story's not finished yet, but looking back on that, you just have this sense of helplessness, I think, as a brand new parent, where there really isn't a guide for you, or you've seen everybody else do it before. Like if you have an older brother or sister and they go through junior high and high school, you can look at them and go, oh, okay, so that's how I was an only child, so I had to look at other people's older siblings and look at that and say, okay, there's a pattern of behavior that gets you through school and makes you look successful or makes it look like you were having a good time. I guess I'll do that. Or your parents, of course, they do things a certain way and you emulate them because your parents are cool up until they're not, and then they're horribly uncool. I don't know. Maybe Austin hasn't flipped that switch yet, or he hasn't had the heart to tell us. But if we've entered an uncool phase, he's been easy on us. I'm sure we have. I'm sure we entered that phase when he was like 2. But anyway, you talk about a lot in startups or just life in general about pattern matching and this whole idea that, okay, I see this general way of doing things and I can recognize that and riff on it or do something different or adapt it or apply it to my own life. And I guess we all do that as parents. We just pick up on all these cues. We read all these books, what to expect when you're expecting, and all these other classic, what happens when you're parenting. And there are 10,000 books on how to be a good parent. I've probably been given a half a dozen of them. I don't think I've ever read any of them. I don't know. So I'm a bad dad.
Oh, no, I think you're a great dad, but that's exactly why I'm doing this podcast, because I remember when we were expecting our first child, my wife, she loves reading. She read every book there is to read on birthing and everything that happens before you get the child. But then our daughter was born, and you just look at her, you're like, wow, I haven't read anything about what to do now. I guess I'm going to have to wing it.
And this child is demanding services right now. What do I do?
Right, and if you go online, you can pretty much find any advice that you want, but a lot of it is conflicting, which is actually a lot like in startups, right? When you get a lot of advice from your investors, friends, and supporters, and then it's your job to figure out what's the right thing. Except here it's your actual child, human being, and you really don't want to screw that up.
This is not going to turn into an 8 lessons I learned about startups while parenting, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a side blog post.
That's great. Because everybody loves it when you try to tie everything back to startups.
Hey, I don't see why not. Raising a kid is like training an AI algorithm.
Well, I guess I trained an eye, and that's what being a parent is training an eye. And if that eye reflects you and how you view the world, I guess you've done your work. I guess you've provided enough training data, enough learning by example, enough, do as I say, not as I do, son. And then they go, why did you tell me that? And anyway.
But you mentioned doing Spy on It time, and I just found out about this startup of yours yesterday. I didn't know.
Spy on It?
Spy on It, yeah.
Yeah, it was a fun time. I mean, that was literally our first solo act together as a group. And we didn't know much. It was kind of like raising a kid, right? See, there I go. Startups to parenting. Not really. We had some patterns. We matched them, and we built a thing. But we built the thing we wanted, and that definitely was helpful.
Were you guys consulting at the same time?
We consulted to bootstrap it, to put just enough money together to rent an office and pay ridiculous fees for a T1 line. Good times. That was like 10 megabit down or 1.5 megabit down. I mean, it was basically like your phone on low battery saver mode level of bandwidth is what it felt like. I mean, or what it was compared to what it felt like at the time, which is like, we're rich, we're kings, we've got a T1 line, we can download all the internet. There wasn't that much of it then, I guess.
Before Napster?
Just before, wait, no, just after. Napster happened in 96, 90, 98? It was late 90s, yeah. I think Napster kind of hit its prime in 97, 99 timeframe, and we started Spy on it in late 98, early 99, like during the peak of .com 1.0 craziness. It was a little less crazy in Chicago than maybe it was in the Valley or Boston or New York or any of the other coastal hubs, but it still was frothy. Everybody thought they had it all figured out. And, Webvan was going to be the next great thing, and Cosmo was going to deliver all my stuff, and all those fun things that actually are happening now, a lot of those were just misfires. They weren't quite ready.
So the Silicon Valley was going through the gold rush, and were you guys working 100 hours in order to beat the competition and win?
No, occasionally. There was a period during the consulting part where I was sleeping at the office, which was stupid because I was so unproductive. And Steve came in one morning and was just like, I'm taking you out for breakfast. And I was like, what? He's like, what are you doing? I'm taking you out for breakfast. So I went out and got an omelet, and then I went back to work on whatever. I was working on this thing called No Gimmies. We were trying to do this golf fantasy sports app, or it was a crazy. It wasn't even that. It was this concept we were working on for this other guy, and for whatever reason, I was trying to code up the entire front end, and I was doing a terrible job of it. But we were also behind or something. So it's about the only time I can remember was during this particular period of ever working all-nighter type college style hours once I was out in the wild. And that was sort of lesson one of, guess what? You're human. You're not going to be any more effective than anyone else if you keep doing this. So stop doing that. And that was actually, I think, just before either we were pregnant with the first one or we're about to start. It was just before parenting happened. Yeah. Or, kids happened. Whichever, same thing. And so I think there was kind of a correlation there that I realized, all right, I'm going to need to start building a little bit of a wall between time I spend at work and time I spend not at work so that I can actually be helpful at home. And, we figure out the balance of our mother and father relationship with the kid. And, I think the other guy, I mean, we all worked hard. You can't get anywhere without, first of all, if you're not doing work, you'll be exposed. If you're 4 guys in a van like we were then, maybe we were 5 employees by then, there's nowhere to hide. You're either contributing, you're adding value, or you're hitting the bricks. So just being smarter about how you do that. And I think as a co-founding team, we worked really well together because we had great sort of overlapping skill sets. We all cared a little bit about each other's business, but we all ultimately ceded that business to that person as the specialist. Eric, CTO, technical genius, all up and occasionally really interested in and pushing back on UX approaches I had to making the technology platform he had in mind happen as a user experience. So it's great that he's opinionated, but in the end, he lets me make the call. I'm certainly going to let him make the call about what's the architecture and how's that happen, but I might be opinionated about, well, here's the system model. What should the user's mental model be? And he's ultimately going to say, yeah, you go. That makes sense to me. Just keep this, and this in mind. Dick and Steve, then also, we all kind of represented, I think, the standard poles or set roles and responsibilities you see in a startup. Dick, CEO, decision maker, money tree shaker, ultimately the guy who would go out and raise whatever rounds that we were going to raise. He was helping lead that process. He was coding at first, but then realized his time spent in the code base was not his time most well spent. So he would remain, he and Eric would have some arguments or occasional discussions around some architectural stuff, but in the end, Dick was just like, I got to get out of here. This is not making any sense for me to be in here. And besides, if I really want to show you who's boss, we'll just go play FIFA 98 for a while, and I'm just going to bang on the keyboard and, yeah. Hey, those early editions of FIFA, those are pretty great. That's how that franchise got started, and 98 was a good one. But anyway, we specialized, and because of that, and I think we all learned and knew how to like laugh at each other's jokes. I've said that elsewhere. You need sort of some common cultural ground to really gel as a small team. We found ways to do that, and found ways to then be as productive and really focused on doing the best we could for each other and ultimately for the business. And all having kids at the same time, realized, well, we got to just figure out how to balance this out and cover for each other when stuff's going on in our lives or when everything's okay, like just strike the best balance we can.
It's interesting to me because I've experienced this myself where startup people without kids don't actually understand that, a dad might want to go home early and be with their kids because other folks in the office are just playing video games, foosball, drinking beer, socializing, whatever, because they don't have anything to go to and do at home. And that makes me realize maybe it's actually good for parents to find co-founders who are also parents because that's going to put everybody on the same page.
I think you'll find in general you'll have a more focused 6 to 8 hours of effort out of those folks. It'll be more defragged than I think you might see with somebody without kids, because I was the same way when I was in my mid-20s. I think I was just spending more time doing whatever.
All right, so let's see. You guys had a highly effective team. Everyone had kids. And did you guys sell the startup, Spy on It? What happened to it?
We did sell the company to a Canadian company that tried to then turn it into a mobile banking and alerts platform to sell to carriers to plug into their, infrastructures. This is the alerts service that we've got. And, the dot-com crash happened. The company's business strategy ultimately wasn't that sound, and enterprise sales cycles being what they were, taking this pure consumer service and adapting it to then become this enterprise system that you actually had an installer on top of that could install this onto a server. And anyway, we did a whole bunch of repackaging. 3-year lockup. I mean, it was the longest. It was a long 3 years to keep working on the same thing, and we couldn't wait to start working on something else by the end of it. And it was a good experience in knowing what you don't want to negotiate in a deal and how much time from a time and money perspective. And so lessons learned and locked away for the next run we took at something which ended up being Feedburner.
So once the lockup ended, did you guys jump right into your next startup with the same team?
Yeah, we held together as a team. Nobody got distracted and went off to do something else. We all took kind of a summer off between the dissolution of our lockups with the Canadian company and then starting something new. And then that fall we got back to it and started, doing the consulting thing again. And I'm trying to think, what year was that? 2003. So I had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at that point. So I don't know if this didn't quite line up with the other 3 guys, but I basically had a kid during each phase of the 3 startups. So my first was born during Spy on It. My second was born during that interim company we were working for, 724. And then my third eventually was born in 2005 during the absolute height of madness for Feedburner. And when the service was really exploding, podcasting had launched, and we caught right on that edge. And here I am doing my first podcast ever. 12 years later.
Podcasts are still like the biggest users of Feedburner?
I wouldn't be surprised unless there's some better analytics platform out there or distribution platform. I don't know. I honestly don't know how Google's ever going to shut down Feedburner without causing a whole lot of trouble. I mean, maybe it just all unplugs and nothing happens, but there's so many Feedburner URLs out there floating in the water, in the weeds.
So for your next startup, just work in some royalties and make sure you're always getting paid.
There's totally a great royalties deal on all those dead URLs. Let me tell you, if I can go to the bank with all those every Friday. No, it's just funny to think about how sort of enduring that part of the service has been. I mean, I stopped working on Feedburner in any meaningful way like 8 years ago. Barely worked on it once we were inside of Google, about a year's worth at most.
Since Feedburner was your second startup and you already had kids, was your life any different now than it was before?
We worked hard on Feedburner. One thing with that was I was living in Chicago and had a pretty regimented commute. And I know this is not the case for people that don't live in bigger urban areas or who ride like, itinerant commuter rail. Like I rode the suburban rail for most of our Feedburner time, which I had this 7:48 a.m. train that was the right one to catch to get to the office by 8:30, 8:40 something, right when things were really getting going. And then there was a 5:47 p.m. and a 6:30 or a 6:0 something. I think I would remember this. I think it was like 6:01 p.m. that were the best trains to catch going home. So they really put a solid cap on what was my day in the office. Didn't mean the work stopped. I mean, I took a laptop home. I would work on the train. I would work late at night on this, that, and the other. When I felt like I could get away with it. But it's funny, those little enforced routines make a difference in terms of how you structure your life. And I think they give you permission to create the space you might need otherwise. And I don't know, like if you're just parking in some parking lot and you're just leaving and arriving whenever traffic lets you, maybe you could argue like Seattle traffic or LA traffic or pick your city traffic has its rush hour peaks that you want to avoid, and when those are going to be. Like I know getting back from Kirkland to Mercer Island here, like leaving at 5:30 was insane. Leaving at 6:30 was quite a bit better, at least back when I was still commuting by car.
And now it's like 8:30.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's probably worse now. That's why I ride a bike to work. That's why I rode a bike in Chicago. That's one of when I lived in the city, a bike commute gives you almost complete predictability.
Well, it's a great exercise.
Yeah, I mean the exercise. Well, we make fun of me and my electric bike and whatnot, but if you think of the electric bike as a car replacement, not a cheating bike, then it makes a lot more sense. And I try to get on that thing whenever possible. I mean, I commute around. Like if I work downtown and then have a meeting after work in South Lake Union, the north end of the city where Amazon is. Or something like that, I'll just ride the bike over there because I'll get there faster than taking an Uber or taking a streetcar or anything. I mean, certainly faster than walking there. And it continues to be one of the best hacks in any city that I can think of. And then I'll lock that bike up, hope it's there when I come back after the meeting or the happy hour or whatever, and ride it all the way home, 7-8 miles, because it eats up the hills and then is really great to ride in the flats. And so I know you don't want this to be a bike podcast, but it's just I guess getting back to that point about like having something that allows you to have a more predictable routine and be able to set up the right guardrails for your work and your not work life is a good thing.
All right, so let's see. The predictable routines actually worked out for you quite well. You guys ended up selling Feedburner to Google. And since then, while working at Google, you had not taken a single day off. Tell us more.
I guess. I mean, I took vacation time at Google. The one you want irony. Google's, maybe it's not irony. You want missed opportunity. Let's call it that. I'll let your audience decide if it's irony. Google had ridiculous paternity leave policy, right? Like it was equivalent to maternity. I think it's 6 weeks. 6 weeks off. Maybe not quite 6 months, but 6 weeks at least. And we were done with kids just about the time that we got acquired and that I became a Google employee. And it was not like, oh, just to get 6 weeks off, we should have a fourth kid. Nah, that'll never work. We'd already mentally committed or fully committed to like, okay, 3 and done. And so there we were. But yeah, so the one time in my career that I could have had like all sorts of extra infrastructure to have the time I need to be, more engaged parent or just have more time away from work that's guaranteed. Also, it's a bigger company. You feel like there are more people who can cover for you when you're gone. You're working on fewer things. You feel a little less perhaps essential to the business the way you would with a really small startup where you are 1/4 or 1/5 or 1/8 of the thing or whatever the ratio is. It didn't happen. And all our kids were starting to grow up by then. So yeah, I took vacation. I feel like I probably didn't take quite enough vacation because, I don't know, what did I have? I had 14 or 15 days in my bank when I left, so that's kind of dumb. I should have actually used them while I was working. But I never felt at Google, I always felt like I was running my 8-minute mile pace. It was a comfortable but spirited pace. I never felt like I was running flat out. There were there was a week or two here and there where there was a lot of stuff going on, but there was a week or two in 3.5 years where I felt like I was really running hard. The rest of the time just felt like, my half marathon, shooting for, $145 or faster, and just, running through the flats and a couple of hills here and there, but just keeping pace is kind of how the place felt. So, and it has nothing to do with parenting, but my kids also at that point were upper middle single digits. So interesting ages, starting to experiment with sports, and schools still pretty straightforward. Obviously, you're in second, third grade, kindergarten, and all of that. So it's not like the academics are super difficult or anything like that yet, and you can't help your kids. Like right now, every now and then my son came home with some Java loop code stuff from his high school, and I actually fired up the inspector and tried to write some JavaScript for it. I was like, God damn it, how does this work? Do I have to recurse here? And I'm over there swearing away in my office, and he's like, Dad, I just need help with this homework. I just need this. I was like, I finally sent him some code, and said, here, I think this is generally how this works. He's like, I already got it. Parenting failure right there is I internalized the problem and made it mine instead of actually trying to help him think through it. But I was just like, oh, okay, a code problem. I'll go solve that. Yeah, so that was kind of dumb. But at this point, we were talking about back when I was at Feedburner, there was a lot less of that. I would be traveling a lot with going to Mountain View or going to New York, doing stuff with Google there, and then coming back to Chicago or coming back to Seattle once we moved. And just enough time had elapsed that I felt like, in 2 or 3 days, I didn't miss the big story, but I usually had to kind of get a recap or a digest from my wife. Amy would tell me, here's, what happened this week, and, there's this, here comes soccer this weekend, or here comes this other thing that we're going to be doing, and what are we going to, if we're going to take a trip at Christmas, what are we going to do? And, so it's just kind of the wheels turned. There wasn't anything particularly dramatic about it. It's just, again, it's funny that with all the chaos and zaniness that went along with the smaller companies, that's when we decided to have all of our kids. And then once things finally smoothed out and were a little bit more predictable, the kids were just doing the growing up thing, and we were done building or extending the family.
I find you're really engaged with your kids' activities. You go to swim meets, soccer practices, volunteering, and all of those other things. And I actually find them really stressful because that's the time when you are around your kids, but you're not fully participating with your kids. So it feels almost like the time you shouldn't be spending with them because you're not actually with them.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. And I've spent less time at practices than I have at games, I think, because in general the practices are going on weeknights or even during weekdays, and that's where my wife is in charge and is the Sherpa moving people and goods around the island or the suburbs or wherever it is we're living. And so I've been there for the more or less the events. So I get to be there for the the fun, competitive, and interesting part, which is fine. It's more like spectator sport for me. But being it's being at those events, even that's important too, because you want the kids to know you care, that they're out there trying to achieve, and that they're trying to do well at something that you introduced them to or that you gave them a choice to go be a part of. That's one thing. Is we have in general put sports and other activities like band and what instrument are you going to play in front of our kids as choices, but not as directives. You will be good at violin or tuba or trombone, or actually it's all, I think we've had three trombone players and or 2 trombone players and a piano player in the end. My wife's musical, I'm not. I mean, I was fine at rock band, but I only played sax for a few years in middle school, and then pretty much quit on that, and then tried terribly to pick up guitar in college. So I was useless at it, but I have decent pitch, but who cares? I can't play an instrument. But the kids can, and they've chosen to do that to some extent. In the end, none of them ended up in the marching band or in a band, but it's early yet. That could happen in college or something goofy. Comes out of the woodwork like that. Anyway, I don't know where we're going with this, but choices, directives, we've just given the kids a big menu of choices and let them naturally. We basically said you're going to have to make some choices and stick with them. You can't just sit around, and refresh Instagram, but we want you to at least have the likeliest thing for you to be interested in and pursue be the thing that you pursue. My parents gave me a bunch of choices. I swam, I played baseball, I played soccer. swimming was great, but when we moved when I was a kid, I used it as an excuse to get out of going to swim practice 5 days a week. We moved from Miami to Dallas. And then in Dallas, I played a little soccer and played baseball. And then eventually just fell in with baseball as the game that I liked playing the most as a kid. And that's what I stuck with. And we've kind of taken the same model with our kids. Is like none of them play baseball, it turns out. But lacrosse or rec soccer or swimming have been the things that have held up for them. And I just think the more you can make it clear that it's a choice for the kid, the better your chances are that they're going to really dive in deeply and say, this is something I've chosen, I'm interested in, and I want to be good at. And that's not just sports. I mean, it also goes to, like I say, music or other interests that you put them in front of, and go to a code camp, go to some volunteering. You never know where an interest is going to come up or where it's going to be found.
Personally, Jen and I are very hippie as far as it comes to giving kids choices. And to do that, though, I think you need a lot of time and you need a lot of patience, and you need to embrace your kids as fully grown adults who are able to make choices, but you also need to wait for them to make those choices, and you need to be prepared if they say no, if they want a third option, right, between the two things that you gave them. And it's much like you and I. If we're giving something to do that we don't want to do, we're going to put it off till later and later and later. And kids would also not want to do something that they don't find valuable, but just give them something that's really interesting to them, and they're just going to run with it.
We've been deliberate about giving them a menu of choices. Here are these 3 or 4 sports. Here are these band or school activities. You're going to have to at least give this a try during this period of your life. Sorry, them's the breaks where the parents were calling the shots. So you can't just fully free range on that, I think. I think you want to provide that structure. But in as much as you're in a school district or in a community where those choices exist, and I know there are communities where they don't, and that's obviously it's a shame, but you do the best you can. That where you have the opportunity to put those choices in front of the kid, it's remarkable how curious kids can be and how clearly they'll communicate what's interesting and what's not so interesting to you. And in some cases, like with our youngest, you have to read them. Each kid's a little bit different, and they each have their own take. Like our youngest is my wife has characterized him. I hate it, I love it. Like he will absolutely put up hell, fire, and damnation to say that this is the worst thing. You're the worst parents ever. I can't believe you're making me do this. First time skiing or first time playing lacrosse or first time, I'm trying to think what was the other one most recently. Something on a vacation. I don't even remember, but it was, he's totally that guy. He will just absolutely pitch a fit. You'll have to push him off the chairlift, so to speak, or practically put him in peril to get him to snap to. And then once he does, especially if it's a physical sport of some kind, he's just got great hand-eye coordination and is will repeat the hell out of anything. He goes out and shoots baskets for an hour just to because he was playing a little bit of an NBA video game. And, that was one of them. Basketball, no way, I absolutely don't want to do that. And then he had a lot of fun with it, although he hasn't stuck with it as a sport. It's the same thing. Meanwhile, the others are just okay, sure, I'll give it a try. Nah, that wasn't very cool. But they won't pitch the same fit that the youngest will. Uh-huh. And he's probably always going to be that way. He's just going to be obstinate about, nope, this doesn't fit my worldview, not doing it, somehow cracks the glass on that and goes and does it and then realizes, this is pretty great. So sometimes you have to look past that. Sometimes you have to call the kid's bluff, I guess is what you might call that, and play your parenting card and say, no, you're going to do this. And you may not like it, but you're going to have to, again, I know I just said give kids choices, but in some cases you realize that there's a better opportunity for the kid to learn and grow in a given scenario, and that just sheltering them or just saying, no, it's fine, it's cool, we don't have to do that, isn't actually going to force them to to take a risk.
Well, you're still giving them choices. You're not saying you have to stick with this for 5 years.
No, that's true. You're not you're going to get a scholarship in this, or or you're going to keep trying. Yeah, but sorry, you're going to have to try this. Yeah. Forcing sampling of new experiences. I mean, it's time immemorial. We've been doing that for as long as there have been new experiences, right? I suppose as parents, and finding your own way to do that. I think every parent-child dynamic is going to be different about how they manage that. But if you have more than one kid, realize that they're probably different in their own ways, and you're just going to have to, find the right ways to motivate the kids differently, or based on who they are and how they present. Like our oldest was like, yeah, I'll try whatever. Yeah, sure, I'll give it a try, Mom and Dad, because you said so. He'd probably try darn near anything once and then be like, nope, didn't like that. But it's totally wet clay at first in almost anything new.
Yeah, in 2017, it's really hard to. Again, it's on parents to do that, right? But it's so easy to just shove an iPad in front of the kid and say, "There you go, just do Facebook or watch some movies."
Right.
And a lot of people do that, and it's not so much their fault, right? Like when you get tired, your kids are screaming all sorts of things. It's so easy to just give them a cartoon and say, "Just watch it." But you could also just give them a book, and eventually they'll like scream about it, but eventually they'll probably read it.
Right.
But so that's parenting choices.
We've certainly put the iPad in front of the kids from time to time, traveling or those kind of scenarios. It's definitely convenient. Although I do have my regrets about like how much of that time has really been quality, or how much of it's just been junkware. There's a lot of junkware out there, and how much actual learning or growing has actually happened on digital screens. Probably not as much as any of us would like.
So it sounds like you guys did a lot of imitation in your parenting. You saw what your parents did. You liked some of them.
Yeah, I mean, the technology and those social circumstances. Technology changed a lot, but social circumstances probably aren't that different. There are a lot of participation sports. There are more of them now, but they're still like, here's this school thing, here's this after-school thing, here's this extracurricular thing. You should find one of these, and get your homework done, and have some responsibilities around the house. So yeah, we're probably playing off of our parents' playbook more or less.
Do you guys take any classes?
Like as adults, you mean?
No, as parents on how to be better about being parents. Like for example, there's a class my wife signed me up for is some kind of how to basically respond to your kids if they have tantrums, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How to manage that.
No, I never took any attended classes type things. I might have read up on a couple of things here and there. But like I said, most of those how to be a better parent books that I might have gotten when I was a new dad, never really cracked the cover on it. Like I said, it explains a lot.
Well, it seems like it's working out, Your kids are doing fine. You guys are still alive.
Yeah, we're still alive. Yeah, that's the benchmark.
You're still together.
Yeah,
that's also a big point.
Yeah, I do feel good about that. That we somehow have a family dynamic that works well, and that we actually want to go on vacations together, and all of that you might take for granted might not be the case.
So, based on everything that happened to you and your kids, for what advice? A series of advice would you give to new parents, expecting parents, and maybe the things that worked out well for you, things that didn't work out well, and in hindsight, like something that you would have done differently that could help people?
Oh, that's a fair amount to unpack. For the new parents, we did do some. I vaguely recall doing some new parenting classes with my wife, and I don't remember if there was a separate dad's thing. I would say take advantage of those resources, either your hospital or your school or community center or wherever that you feel as a couple will help you prepare. Because again, the whole coming home with the new bundle of joy and not knowing what the hell to do is a universal reaction, but you can prepare and you can be in better shape to know how will I work how will we split this up as parents? In fact, I think maybe I'll be more precise. My wife and I had, I think, a pretty clear plan. She was a school social worker. She was tenured, could have stayed in that district and kept working. And being that it's a school district with lots of teachers who are parents, it would have been completely reasonable for her to keep working. But she made it clear somewhere during that first pregnancy that was like, I think I'm going to leave and probably not go back. I think I want to be dedicated to the kids full time, and was clear that she made that as her choice, and that we would then need to agree as a couple, okay, that means you, Matt, are going to go be the breadwinner full time and be the best breadwinner you can, because we're not going to have a second income, at least not from her working directly for some time to come, and her social work licenses or certifications or registrations, a whole bunch of that once you lose it, it's like really annoying to get back. So like her reset and to become a social worker again in her career would be like maybe after the kids are all out of the house. So knowing going into that, we had this very clear, you're the guy, you go be the career guy, I'm going to be the full-time homemaker, and you can flip the gender roles on that. You do it however you want as a couple. One parent going full for the household and the other going full for the career. That's one choice. Both mixing it up, or like trying to share parental duties while pursuing full-time careers. That's another choice. I don't know what the other choice is at that point.
But basically, make sure
but
you know
have a choice.
Make it clear that agree on what the choice is going to be.
Absolutely. Have a very clear agreement. Have a very open conversation about what happens after this kid gets here. What do you really want to do? If you don't know, that's cool. But if one distinct possibility is you're going to start raising these kids full time and not pursue that job you've got, and if the wife happens to be the bigger bread earner than the husband and wants to become a full-time mom, I could see how that'd be like a big tension thing. Right. And, it's like, well, how are we going to, your income is pretty fantastic. How are we going to fill that hole? Well, maybe you're not. You're just going to have to figure out some other plan, save differently, so on and so forth. I just think the more communicative you are about that, and the more open and honest your disagreements are, I know, blah, 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 startup life lessons. You talk about transparency and founders or leadership team, having at it, and being very clear, they're not happy with each other. Rather have that happening out in the open than in some secretive room somewhere. And so I could see the same thing happening with the parents. You harbor this grudge, she's going to give up her job and then that's going to suck and I'm going to have to rah, rah. If you're just internalizing that, it just feels like death. It just feels like it's a really bad for the relationship. And somehow I've been lucky enough, married to a woman who's very good about being extroverted about well, this is not good, or this is great, and let's have a conversation about it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's talk about it. I probably am more likely to internalize my feelings and be the grumble guy, but she pulls it out of me eventually. And fortunately, in this case, it was never grumble. We were having a conversation well, what's going to happen when we have this kid? Well, I'm probably not going to work anymore. I was like, okay, all right, I guess I'll go just full in on this startup we're doing now, and if I have to go get a regular job someday, I guess I'll go do that. And somehow I just never quite got a regular job. Well, I did, but I never. Yeah, I just kept doing more of what I was already doing.
No, it's wonderful to hear because I've seen new parents or people who are planning to be parents asking, well, how do we maintain our relationship better?
Yeah.
What books should we read? Or should we go to counseling? Or the responses sometimes are, you should get a shrink. And I'm like, have you tried talking to each other?
I would start with talking to each other. And then if you need counseling, it might just show up in the conversation. But we never needed any counseling. I didn't feel we just had a couple of shouting matches here and there, but that was few and far between. The rest of the time it was yeah, okay, this is what we're going to do. Okay, I'm on board. Blood signature? Nah, just got it. Okay, move on. Next. Why is there a big wheel in the driveway? Onto the more minutia of the thing at that point.
So I guess transparency is the biggest thing with your partner, with your kids in general.
Yeah, and I think the kids get it from you too. Is they know mom and dad are likelier to have more open conversations about family matters. They feel more involved and have a better sense of what's going on. And, there was never any ambiguity among our kids about okay, well, dad goes off and he does this thing with this company. I don't quite understand what that is, but mom is the one we know is going to be schlepping us around town, and will always be the primary one who's at at a practice or at an event. And dad, meanwhile, will be less frequently at those things, but you can hopefully count on him in 20 minutes, Carol, I have to leave to go, schlep kid to soccer. But that's something I can definitely do and enjoy doing on Sundays, especially when it's a nice sunny Sunday like this one.
And he knows you're going to be there at exactly the right time, which is beautiful.
Well, I'm nothing if not punctual.
Yep. Well, last question then. How do you guys rest? Kids are challenging and they take a lot from you.
It's easier now that the kids are pretty self-directed. And it's not that everybody goes and huddles with their digital screen, although certainly that happens. I think we find time. We don't absolutely jam the calendar with activity all the time because there's going to be the sports league here, and then there's going to be the DI, Destination Imagination, this sort of forensic and intellectual and physical activity competition that my sophomore son's doing, and then swim team's going to be crazy for my senior. They're just going to be these waves of activity with kids, and then like spring lacrosse, the youngest is going to be. I know it sounds like sports all the time with us, and I guess that's the age we're at now. But it wasn't always that way. But there was always something going on one way or the other. You just got to find the time, and I think probably it's led to us having probably less of a interfamilial social life. Like, I don't know that we spend as much time like going to nights out with other adults or going to other social activities. Like, my wife and I have basically taken, I think, 1 weekend or 2 weekend away type trips with none of the kids along.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
in a year or in the last 20?
I'm talking about since we've had kids. Yeah.
Wow.
Like one trip to Vegas, 2 side trips, kind of, sort of, to London and Dublin, but they were very quick side trips that were part of other things. Like, we've never just been like, oh, I got to get away from those kids. So I think there's maybe like a fundamental difference between us and some other parents there. And I'm not saying we're better or anything. I just feel like we just don't have this desire to like, got to get away from the kids or got to unplug from and not be a part of the kids' lives. Like, every now and then, like getting a Friday night away or something, like, it's easy for me to say too, because I take these business trips. I'd be gone from Tuesday through Thursday, and I come back on Thursday night. I'm like, well, what's been going on around here? I'm genuinely curious to know, what did I miss? But I also went and worked and, you know, hung out in New York or somewhere, you know, some other city, and did my dad goes to work thing, and that's fine. But in the end, when we come back, the time we spend together is generally time spent together as a family. And even though flying 5 people somewhere is a pain in the ass and is more expensive than flying 2 people somewhere, that's what I signed up for. And I don't know. Yeah.
I know I said that was the last question, but
Yeah.
I promise maybe this one is the last. Flying.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
a private pilot.
Yeah, yeah.
I was really curious, and it was really fun to fly with you that one time. But,
Yeah.
you know, you have 3 kids and a wife. Flying is less dangerous if you know what you're doing, but still
Yeah.
perceived as dangerous.
Yeah,
How
I
does
know.
that work?
It's just, I don't know. It's what is it, by actual highway or travel or miles traveled? I think highway travel or
Extremely more dangerous.
quite a
than
bit
flying.
more dangerous than flying. So it's one of these Nate Silver type things where the stats show one thing and public perception is totally another. It's just this whole idea that you're in what amounts to a 40-year-old automobile 3,000 feet above the ground. And what happens if that engine conks out or,
Yeah.
you know, while you're in takeoff? I don't know. There's always going to be that perception around it. But I will say, you know, my kids are bored. Like, they don't want to fly with me anymore because it's just like, we're not doing anything, Dad. And like, so if I fly them somewhere for breakfast, that's a pretty good incentive. My wife just fundamentally has never liked flying, period, doesn't like flying commercially. So she's never flown with me, and I respect that. And I know that it would take potentially getting a much bigger plane or a much smaller plane, like just a tiny little seaplane, takes off and lands and stays, you know, right on the water or something that doesn't feel as scary as flying over trees or houses or what have you. Maybe she'd be more interested in that. I don't know. It just works because people who are like, oh, take me at work, or, you know, anytime I offer for people to go flying, like when you went flying with me, they have a great time. And it's unlike any other way of seeing the world that you live in, like flying over your neighborhood and spotting your house from the air, or, you know, where you work or anything like that. It's just a completely different perspective, literally. And people are more like kids when they're up flying with me than they are in most of the other interactions we have, where they're just like, you know, the whole sense of wonder thing is totally real. It's just like, whoa, I can't believe you can see the world from up here like this. Oh, and we're going to fly right over the airport? Yeah, because the airport lets you do that. You ask for permission, they'll let you fly right over it. So we fly right over, you know, SeaTac and look down, and there's a 757 landing right underneath us because that's, you know, you understand the system, you know how to work within it, and you get these cool experiences like that. Or, like I say, flying for what the pilots call the $100 hamburger, you know, flying an hour.
It's literally a $100
hamburger. That's shortchanging it. It's more like a $200 hamburger, depending on where you're going. But yeah, that's just it. The thing I love most about flying is sharing that experience. And like flying solo it's fun and it's a nice mental break, but there's nothing quite like taking somebody new up or somebody's kid up for the very first time. I've taken some daughters and sons up, and the looks on their faces when they get out of the plane, you know, it's like that's That's what any pilot, I would hope, would try to shoot for, is to share, or anybody who loves doing a thing and can share that thing would shoot for that end result.
That's great to know. And I'm going to make a mental note. Take my daughter with you.
Hey, once she can get in a booster seat, it would totally work. So
sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Hey, yeah, sure.
And
I don't know if this is what you were looking for, but it was fun and interesting.
It's great. And I'm going to put some links up on the website, and if people want to ask questions, then I'll link you up to them.
Okay.
And maybe we'll do another round with more advice from Matt.
Oh, boy. Just what you want. More advice from Matt. Well.
I do.
All right, Carol. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Rad Dad Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please go to our website, raddadshow.com, and subscribe to our newsletter to get notified when the next episode is up. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, you can also leave us a note on the website. I'm looking forward to hear from each and every one of you. Thank you, and I'll see you soon. Your host, Kirill Zubovsky.